Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Dental Economist Show with me, your host, Mike Huffaker. This week, we are releasing a special episode of the Dental Economist Show. This is a panel discussion that took place at Orbit 2024. Orbit is the Planet DDS annual leadership and user conference, and it is filled with a multitude of educational tracks on product, operations, leadership, and filled with a lot of great folks, our customers that use Denticon, Cloud9, Apteryx, and Legwork products. This year, we had a panel discussion. The topic was best practices for operational excellence. And we had a fantastic panel for this conversation. So the panel included Tom Barberio, who is the CIO of Thinc Forward, which is an IT provider who works with a lot of our really large clients, including Dental 365, SBS, Star Dental, Oak Point, just to name a few. We also had Emma Cifuentes, who is the COO of Progressive Dental Management. Progressive Dental Management is another Denticon client. They've been a longtime client, and they've grown significantly while using the Denticon platform. They are not PE backed. They have self-financed the growth of their organization and done an incredible job. And Emma just has a ton of wisdom to share on this panel. And then we also have Allison Hale, who is the COO of Parks Orthodontics, one of our Cloud9 clients. Allison has been running this organization, this business, for quite some time and has a lot of knowledge to share on the best way to really drive operational excellence. So we'll be back to our standard format. In fact, I think we will just be releasing, as we typically do, a weekly edition of the Dental Economist Show. And this is just a bonus episode. So I really hope that you enjoy it. And really, we hope that you'll join us next year at Orbit 2025. It's going to be taking place in San Antonio this year. It will be from March 6th through 8th. So save the date, mark it on your calendar. And if you are a user of Denticon, Cloud9, Apteryx, or Legwork, or have considered using it, I think this panel discussion will be really helpful for you to understand how we solve for a lot of the pain points within the dental and ortho space. Because you're going to hear things and capabilities that you likely are unable to do today with the software that you are using that our panelists discuss, because they do have the ability to do that with Planet DDS products. I hope you enjoy. And as always, like, subscribe, hit all the buttons. Your reviews really matter to us, and we thank you for your support. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, right after lunch. We will try to keep you awake. I know that's always a tough time slot for everyone when you've just filled yourself with food and you sit down in a chair, and for me, always it feels like nap time. So we'll try to prevent that. I do want to thank, before we get started, our sponsor for this session, Dental Exchange. And so we have Kara here from Dental Exchange. I don't know if any of you all have had the opportunity to meet her or to go over by the table. This last week and a half has been a really challenging time for the dental industry with the Change Healthcare incident. And Dental Exchange has really stepped up for a lot of folks within the industry and been a really excellent partner. And so we just thank you for the support and thank you for the sponsorship. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike Huffaker. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Planet DDS. I am also the host of the Dental Economist podcast. I am neither a dentist nor an economist, so I feel a little bit like imposter syndrome here. But I do want to call that out. We would love to have you all check out the podcast where we speak to leaders across the DSO and the dental space who have a growth mindset and who are focused on growing their practice and building culture. And they share lots of management tips and other great advice on how we can all improve. So that launched earlier this year. We'd love for you all to check it out. Some people also say that I look a little bit like Travis Kelce. So it's Travis Kelce talking dental is another way that you can think of it if you don't like the Dental Economist Show name. So today I'm joined with three folks that are longtime friends of Planet DDS, and really happy to have such a great panel. Also, this makes this conference official You can't have a dental conference or an ortho conference without a panel discussion. We haven't had one yet, so this is the one panel. So thank you all for joining. So here to my left, I have Emma Cifuentes. She is the COO of Progressive Dental Management. I have Allison Hale, who is the COO of Parks Orthodontics. And I also have Tom Barberio, the CIO of Thinc Forward, which is an independent IT company that works with many of our customers. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves. Would love to hear, what products you use from Planet DDS, a little bit about your business, and anything else that you think that the audience would find interesting.
Yeah. So I'm Emma Cifuentes. I am the COO at Progressive Dental Management. We have 13 offices in the Boston area. We use DentaCon, so we pretty much do from A to Z to make our life easy. So it has definitely been a great product for us.
I'm Allison Hale, COO of Parks Orthodontics in Yorktown, Virginia. We are longtime users of Cloud9 software. We are a single location, single doctor legacy practice. The practice is owned by my sister, Dr. Meredith Parks, but prior to that, it was co-owned between her and my father, Dr. Bill Parks. So glad to be here.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. Tom Barberio, CIO of Thinc Forward. We're a longtime partner of Planet DDS. We're a IT services company that does dental implementations of all different types of software, Cloud9, DentaCon, Aptrix, amongst others.
Awesome. So I think we'll start our conversation today discussing some of the old ways that we went about things and how it looks different now, and how with the implementation of new technologies, your practices are operating in a more efficient manner. And so, Emma, I'll turn it over to you. Can you discuss a little bit, if you think back maybe pre-DentaCon implementation, what things looked like, and then as now you've started to use the software and your organization has become more comfortable with it and you've kind of implemented more consistent organizational workflows, like what that looks like for you all and what sort of benefits you gain?
So I think that prior to DentaCon, we were lying to ourselves. We're constantly saying technology-driven, we are technology this, technology that. But that was a lie. We were using server-based for, one of the most important tools that you have in your dental practice. That's how you communicate with your patients. That's how you go through your day-to-day. And then you go into an office and there's papers everywhere. Oh, but we're paperless. And I'm like, no, you're not. And then the best part was when the server was off. And I'm like, the server's off, I can't get in. And then you had patients come in 15 minutes before. Oh, don't worry, this is gonna be an easy process. Here's 10 pages for you to fill. So I think that for us was definitely a big thing when we went into DentaCon, because we were able to now send, registration for the patient to come in. We are able to send them automated reminder right through the same system. You don't have your team going into 5, 6, 7 different web pages or, programs to figure it out how to communicate with your patients. And because your patients are the lifeline to your practice, why not make your life and your team's life and your patient's life easier and have a software that can offer A to Z and make everything easier? So I think for me, it was just, being more realistic with ourselves, stop lying that everything is perfect and easy. That was the old way. The old way was a lie. And I think the new way is we have this really incredible software that my team feels proud to use it. They are able to communicate the way they need to. They know what they're doing. They have limitations to what they can do to minimize errors. So I think that the new way definitely helped because of that.
When I started at my father's practice 20 years ago, we were using a very old software called OrthoChart, and we were literally opening up the paper charts. It was a pink cardstock thing, stamping it with the date, putting our initials, and then running back to the clinic and saying, your patient is here, to the chairside assistant. And I'm looking at them doing this, and I turn to my coworker, I'm like, what are we doing? She's like, oh, we need the exercise. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't think so. So we switched. After that, we were OrthoTrack users. Again, at the time, we had 3 locations. Running 3 locations with a terminal server was an absolute disaster. And my brother, who's in IT, actually scoped out Cloud9. This, again, was back in 2011. And he's like, you all need to convert to this today. No more servers, no more updates that would crash your terminal server. I don't know if anyone in here came from OrthoTrack. It was just no bueno. But I would say being able to truly become a paperless practice and a chartless practice has been the biggest step that we were able to achieve with Cloud9, and then run it seamlessly across locations and from home.
Excellent. So we have a little bit of a unique perspective on that, and I agree with what Emma and Allison were saying. Some of you may remember, some of your colleagues may have been in medical back in the day. Historically, dental has been an underinvested market when it comes to technology. So the age-old adage is, well, if it's not working, what do? Hire another person, right? So that's kind of something that we see on a regular basis of people saying, well, I have a problem. The only way to fix it is manpower. That's not really the world we live in today. The world we live in today is that there's technologies that are available to be able to push that forward as well as doing that. Now, however, what we tend to see, technology has to catch up with practice, right? So the old way of doing things, you may have a process in your practices, or as your group is growing, if you have multiple practices that may have worked when you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 practices, but now sometimes we'll see customers that say, hey, that process that I did on 5 practices, now that I have 100, that's not sustainable. So the big thing is really understanding what needs to be accomplished and how to really put that process in place while utilizing the technology that's out there.
Tom, I want to go back to you real quick.
Yeah.
Once you've implemented cloud software, there's obviously a different release cadence and motion for new features, benefits, functions that the software allows. You don't have to wait for an update, once a year. It's typically coming out every month or so, which creates kind of a unique set of challenges in the adoption of some of those features or functions within an organization. Like, you can send out the release notes, but is anybody reading it? Are you starting to use those? How have you seen kind of change management on an ongoing basis be managed within some of the organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. See, back in the day, 5, 10 years ago, that wasn't as big of an issue, right? Because the individual entities were controlling that. They would say, hey, I'm gonna control when I'm gonna release this update, or it's gonna change how this works. When you go to a cloud-based platform, SaaS software, which is the way of the future and what people are doing now, you have to be nimble enough to be able to do that. So we have customers all the time that say, hey, we know that this update may be coming out tonight on March 1st. What do we need to do to prepare for that? I think to your earlier point, a lot of people ignore what's just posted in there to say what it is. So it's really key that we tell our customers, you really have to have a way to be able to be agile, to be able to do those changes. And the best way to do that is when you define your best practices that work for your organization. If I were to take a survey, there's probably about 100, 150 people in this room, and say, what's the best practice to do the same task? I bet you would get 60 or 70 different answers to that question. So when you're looking at a cloud-based model, you have to say, how do I fit all of those 60 different ways of working into one container or one box? So the biggest piece of that of change management is really very key documentation. You have to stay tried and true to your process that works for your business, and then wrap the technology around that to make your processes doing that. Now, on the converse of that, there's times where as things change, you may have to be open to slightly altering that process to work with newer updates or newer way of doing things. And that's sometimes hard because people don't like change, especially, how many times someone turns on your computer and people say, oh, my icon moved 1 inch to the left on the monitor, and now that ruins, Mary at the front desk day for a week because of that, right? Happens all the time. So I would say you really have to just preach that change is good, it'll work, and really stay true to the process.
Emma, do you guys have a similar process? I know you like to use kind of the breadth of the software as much as you can. You kind of stay very knowledgeable about what the software offers and what it does. How do you decide when there's like something new that is interesting enough to make you go through all that change management versus like, oh, well, maybe that's just not important to us? And do you kind of go through that thought process as new releases come out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is, like Tom has said, you want to stay true to your SOPs. You want to make sure that you are also staying true to what you're constantly telling your team members. If you're preaching A and you're doing D, it's not going to get very far. So I think for us, the biggest thing when the new releases come out is that going to make it easier? Is that going to create chaos for the team members? And nobody, even if it's good change, nobody likes change. So I think that the moment you say, this is new, people freak out. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm not gonna say new anymore because apparently that is just a bomb ready to explode. And I'm like, no, it's not gonna happen. So what I do now is we just say, to make it easier, we decided to implement this new enhancement that came out into the system. So it's not new. It's not, something that it's going to be hard. It is a new implementation to make it easier to a process that you are already doing. And I think that's what we kind of look for. And then one of the things about any new release, it is so much better than it was before. But regardless, people are like, oh, again? You're going to change the way that the icons are looking? You're going to change this? What's the point? The point is somebody came up with this idea. There was some sort of structure behind this. Why don't we look at it in a positive way? But, we humans really do like to be negative. So we tend to not always look at things and be like, oh, wow, this can actually help me. It's always, oh, wow, this is going to make my life so hard. So I think with us, we just don't really allow that window of, of a choice, really. We just implement it into the workflow, any new releases that come out.
I would totally echo that. My team knows that when I come to a meeting like this, that the Monday I get home, it's going to be like, guess what, guys? This is what we're doing now. So I will say I've prepped them very well over the years. So when I'm away at a meeting, I will come back with 1,000 new ideas. And they just have to go with the flow. But reading through those release notes is definitely my job. And then from there, I take, okay, what applies to financial? What applies to clinical? And then I go to those leads and walk through it with them. Most of the time, they're like, great, we've been waiting for that, or that's so exciting. So I think really, if you're not reading those release notes, when you get that little thing that pops up in Cloud9 that says, there's a new version of Cloud9 available, would you like to read the release notes? Do it. Read them.
Absolutely. Tom, what are some of the new technologies that people might not know about that are starting to become more widely implemented in the industry that does cool stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. People always want to say, what's the next cool thing, right? Dental is not synonymous with, Google. People get very confused with that. So I'd like to get a survey of the room. Show of hands. How many people in your practices use some sort of AI? Raise your hands. Maybe 25, 50%. So now if I said how many of the people in practices are using AI just for clinical, raise your hands who just use AI for clinical things. Okay, so see, it's a lot less. So what people don't understand, and this is, there's buzzwords that always fly around the industry. I love when new buzzwords come out. I do a lot of speaking events and conferences, and everyone's like, oh, this is the latest and greatest thing. So I always say to people, well, what are you trying to accomplish? But one of the things that we're really seeing that I think is going to be a game changer, and we'll stay on the AI topic for a minute, is there's two components of AI. You have AI that's on the clinical side of AI, which is where you're going to have your digital radiographies, where you're doing analysis and there's several products out there in the marketplace today that add enhancements to that, that help guide the clinicians. But then people say, well, that's good, that's great, and highly encourage that, but that's only a portion of my staff. How do I help the rest of my staff? I have back office functions, I have front office functions, other functions that make the business run. So one of the things that we're starting to see kind of, I would say, in the last year and a half or so, and I think is going to be a big push for the rest of 24 into 25, is really what we call workflow process optimization, right? So that is, can I do more quickly with less, right? So that's less people, less time. People always say, can I do it with less money? That's, sometimes the questionable one. But the way to really accomplish that is the technology has shifted. So there are now things that a human used to have to do. It might be something of saying, hey, I want to start to take my patient data, which patient data is king in this market, right? There's such a plethora of things that are in people's practice management system that they don't even realize, right? It's not just, oh, I have, Mary and Bill's insurance card and what I did for them, last month. They came in, I'm a general dentist, I gave them a crown. Or, I'm a specialist and, they had to have an extraction because, maybe I had to send them over to the endodontist or the periodontist. There's now key elements in that data that can be mined. You hear about data mining, saying you have all these potential customers in this database, right? It's not just someone coming in for their regular routine maintenance and checkups. And the technology stack of smart computing and what they call generative AI, another buzzword that's out there, really now can start to analyze that data and start to spit out returns to say, hey, you haven't seen this type of patient, or you only do this much of these types of procedures and things like that. And those technologies could really automate some of that front office stuff, particularly around recall, patient treatment, and patient planning, right? Something that used to only be a manual process that you had to constantly be refreshing and looking at, now can be more automated. Now, this doesn't necessarily replace somebody calling somebody and saying, hey, can you come in? There's technologies that do that, some of that FaceTime, but it allows you to retool your staff to be able to, focus them more on, you're going to get more productivity out of them if someone's on the phone maybe selling them something versus shuffling through all the data manually to find who to call.
Allison, is there anything that you've been looking to implement or that you have implemented related to AI or just any other technology that's been really helpful for you in your practice?
I can speak to two things that just came to mind when Tom was speaking. Number one, because we use a cloud-based practice management system, we had a team member who was strictly clinical, very long time, very reliable worker. She was a veteran and she was moving because of a family event. And she wanted to somehow stay on the team. And I was like, gosh, I don't know, you're clinical. I kind of need you at the chair. Well, come to find out, because we have a cloud-based practice management software, she could actually be a virtual TC for my patients. So what does she handle she lives in North Carolina. We're based in Virginia. She answers phones. She answers clinical questions. People that maybe have a problem that can't be answered by my front desk. They have an aligner question, or maybe they want to get started in treatment, but they want to do it virtually. So we're really able to leverage that anywhere technology because we have Cloud9. I can run any reports I need to run right here from my computer, and I'm not in office. In terms of AI, it's definitely a new thing for us, but I have found the areas where I have been relying on it really heavily is in patient communication, letters, text messages, follow-up. I want my messages to be opened. I want people to read them, and I want them to sound a certain way and have a certain tone. So you can tell AI, hey, write a message to all my patients who have not accepted treatment, letting them know that now is a great time, no time like the present, use a casual and humorous tone. And it'll spit back like, hey, partner, and of course with AI, you're going to have to proof it and read it to make sure it matches, and maybe it takes a couple of tries. But I love using it for that because it can, something that might take me 30, 40 minutes to write a new letter or a new text message or a new email for a specific purpose, it'll spit it out, and then it gives me at least a jumping off point. Same thing with employment advertising. So let's say you're looking for a new records technician or a new clinical assistant. It can write a really exciting, dynamic job opportunity for you. Any of you in here who are in the admin side, or you're like, oh gosh, I've got to write up like the job description for this position, put it into ChatGPT and see what comes out. And at least then you're not starting from a blank page. There's something there. So play around with it. I use it more and more every day.
That's great. What about yourself, Emma?
So like Allison said, I think my phone is like my best friend. I know that everybody's gonna say that. So I actually I'm going to show it because I have the coolest phone. So my phone is like a mini tablet. So my whole life is here, so I'm always on the road. And I love the whole ability to find, that AI gives me the foundation for every text message, for every email. For the majority of the SOPs that I have, they are able to generate 85% what I need, and I can go in and just kind of, fix it and make it more personalized and switch based on what is needed for my practices. So I think that's very big for us when it comes to this whole new world, right, of the AI. For the practice side, the imaging for us has definitely been great. I think it gives the ability for the dentist and the team in the front to have this software where they're able to look at this image that's, there's all these little colorful little things on it, and you're able to understand what's happening. It's kind of like the iTero, that we use iTero, but the iTero is a gray mirror to the inside of somebody's mouth. What I love about the image AI part of it, it is beyond just a picture of your mouth. It is, it's actually the x-ray. So you're able to see, doctor, why didn't you give options? Oh, because of blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, but over here in the software, it's saying that we have 3 options, doctor. And just because it's missing, it doesn't mean that, maybe we shouldn't give them the implant side or the bridge side. So this is just a really nice reminder sometimes for the doctors. And then it also helps that the front understands a little bit what they're looking for. The assistants get excited because they're like, oh wow, did this machine just do this? And I'm like, yeah, you guys like it? So let's make sure you use it. One of the things is technology is great, only if it's utilized, right? So implementation is key, but you can tell somebody until you're blue in the face, it's gonna be amazing, the best thing you ever saw, it's great. It's never that great. So you have to get your team to think it's great. You have to get your team to implement it. You gotta get your team to believe it. And the way that they believe it is, how is this going to make my job easier? So I think that anytime I introduce some sort of AI into the office, it's very like, if you use this, it's going to make sure that you get home on time. If you use this, you just saved, 3 hours. If you do this, guess what? You're going to be able to do, something else over there. You don't have to worry about this. And then my favorite one to the hygienist and the dental assistant is, if you do this technology, guess what? Your doctor will leave you alone. That tends to work the most. But I think that's the most important thing when it comes implementing all of this AI into your office, because it can be very confusing if it is not properly implemented.
If I can just add one thing. So again, you've heard me say I've been managing this practice for just about 20 years now. And when we would go into retreats or team meetings where I was always like the teacher, the one at the front with the screen and the PowerPoint, sort of telling everyone in the practice, here's what we're going to do. Here's the new exciting thing. Here's what's coming down the pipeline. And I want to tell you, this happened to me about a month ago. I decided to do a team retreat, but I was a little bit short on time. So I was like, oh, how can I do this and make sure that it's a good use of everyone's time? I don't have time to do a PowerPoint for this one, but there's some things we need to get done. So I decided, I had a chart paper, white chart, colored markers, and I literally asked my team, I'm like, what are we doing great? And wrote it down. What are our areas where we need to improve? And started writing those down. And literally, by the end of this 2-hour session, they were so energized because all of this information came from them. It didn't come from me, for one. So I wasn't the one standing up there telling everyone what to do. And then we went on from there and assigned a task to someone different in the practice who was going to then implement it. So if you are a practice manager or a doctor or a lead, you don't always have to be the one to initiate the change. Getting your team's buy-in is as easy as asking them, hey, what do you think we could do better? And beyond that, how could we do it better? And hey, don't you want to help me? So just a little tip as we were talking about implementation.
I would want to add in, we won't go too far down that topic, but the buy-in is key. The buy-in is key. If you don't have the buy-in from the people that are using the technology or using the products on a daily basis, you could be the coolest thing, the best thing out there, and if the staff isn't going to use it, it's going to be a device that's going to collect dust, and it's going to give everybody a headache. I can't tell you how many times we go into customers that say, hey, we want a new solution, or we want to do this upgrade, or whatever it is. If the doctor doesn't buy in and the support staff doesn't buy in, you could have the best intentions in the world, but they're the ones who are doing it 8 hours a day. So if you don't have them excited and on board with it, now you're never going to get everybody on board. You're always going to have someone change scares people. But to have the majority of them on board makes those the most successful change and implementation we normally see.
I think we just heard a lot of good things there. Emma makes sure to explain the why it's important, what the outcome is going to be. And Allison has hacked the ability to make it where it seems like it is your team's idea for all the new things that you're looking to implement, which is also brilliant. So I love that. I'm going to go back to you, Emma, about kind of measuring what matters. What does matter in your practice? What are the KPIs that you're looking at, that you're keeping front and center? How is that different from what matters to you versus what each individual practice needs to keep their focus on?
So I think that, every office should absolutely be tracking where the patients are coming from, how many new patients you have. But because new patients, as all of us know, they're always very welcomed, but they are opportunities, right? So the more new patient, the more opportunities you have. But then I think that a lot of offices always talk about, hygiene is great, but not everybody tracks it to the point where is the retention? Why is there a retention there? So I think all of the offices do track their new patients. They do track the retention, but we take it to a point where I'm not going to track how many crowns the doctor did, or how many x-rays were done, or things like that. I hear a lot of sometimes when I go into conferences, if you track this, you're going to get this. And I'm like, okay. But what I do like to track is things that can get me to the results. Kind of like, how many missed calls did you have? Did you actually answer the phone? Because that phone could have been an opportunity, that phone could have been a retention, or that phone could have been a patient that is, coming in for a procedure that was already, proposed. So I do like to track the missed calls. I like to track, the medical history into DentalCon, and the reason why I like that, because that's compliance. And guess what? People say that they checked, they put it on their notes, but it's nowhere there where I can go back and print it if I need to. So we do track the medical history side of it. In the practice level, obviously, you're tracking your collections to make sure it's where it needs to be. Nobody likes to work for free. If not, we're all volunteer our time. But I think that the biggest thing that I do like to track is what is everybody doing in the system? What's happening with the system? So DentaCon does give you the ability to do that. So I'm able to see, the PPP, the PPH, what's happening there. What kind of procedures, categories is the doctors really into? That gives me an understanding of what I might be implementing next. What kind of technology can I implement to make it easier for the team members? So obviously we can go in here and talk about all the million things we can track, but your office is unique based on what you think it's important to track, but your team are the ones that are gonna tell you what they would like to also see, because a lot of people track things that they hear it's important, but it should be kind of like what I mentioned, the missing calls, because you can only have, a track for new patients, a track for this, and a track for that if you know the missing opportunities. So I think that's where tracking, for me, is important, the missing opportunities.
We are really lucky as Cloud9 users to have a great reporting system. And if data miner scares you, don't be scared. It's really awesome once you dig in and figure out what checkboxes and what filters to put on there. And the Cloud9 support guys are super helpful if you have sort of a fear of data miner. But I do love the reporting in Cloud9 and some of the things that we are looking at on a daily basis. We have a great integration with Gauge. So Gauge, I believe, is here today. This is a platform that integrates fully with your data in Cloud9, and then it brings it out to a dashboard where you can, at a moment's notice, see where you are. We had a patient really recently who had a question, and pardon me, so the ortho language and the dental language is sometimes a little bit different, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll make it quick, but we had an early phase 1 patient who was going to need 2-phase treatment, early intervention for crowding, and then later alignment and bite correction. And the dad was like, wow, your phase 2 fee seems really high. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, we raised fees last year, but I'm wondering about that. So I go into Gauge, and again, it's pulling data from practice management systems all over the country. You can pull up comparative fees from your region, like if you're on the Southern Association of Orthodontics, I believe that's here. You can do US, and I could see what everyone else's, like the aggregate phase 2 fee was. And I was like, hey, my fee's right on target. So I didn't feel bad. I really had forgotten that I could drill down into that information. So not only is it giving you production and collections, which is critical in ortho, your AR, it's giving you your new patient conversion stats. It'll also give you your origin of starts. Where are these people scheduling from? It also lets you know, hey, is your OBS program healthy? Are you seeing enough observation patients? Are they just going into OBS and then going into a black hole? I mean, these people have to be called to follow up. So that is a really great integration that Cloud9 has with Gauge. And again, their reporting within is awesome. But then if you really are a visual person and you want to see like that graph of where your production collections and then how it compares to other doctors in your region or even nationwide, it's right there. So go see Gauge and Mary Beth there. It's great.
For the groups that you work with, and I don't know how heavy you get into the reporting or KPIs piece, are there any best practices or recommendations that you guys guide?
Yeah, there is. What we've seen more recently is that nowadays you're getting organizations that are multi-specialty organizations. So this is where you really get into where data is king, right? We've heard that, people say that all the time, because now if you're a dental DSO that may have, X amount of offices of general dentistry, but maybe you have some ortho mixed in there, and now you're hiring specialists. Maybe they travel around, or you have specialty offices. One of the biggest questions, I would say, we usually get in the industry is, well, how do I merge all that data together, right? Because we just saw a perfect example of this here. The ladies up here, they have two probably very distinct business models, right? You've got an ortho business model as a standalone large solo office, and you've got a group that's doing general dentistry and dentistry. Now, let's say there's people out here who have a group who may be doing both, right? So how do you make A and B marry together? So the biggest challenge, I would say, is making sure that you start to standardize, because at the top level, what people want to see is they want to see standardization. But that's difficult when you have two different sets of data, because it's not, it's an apple and an orange sometimes, right? So we really try to work with clients and customers to say, okay, what kind of metrics do you really need to see? And in best practices, there's typically always has something to do with finances, collections, revenue, something to do with patient satisfaction. That's a big thing, right? How satisfied are those patients that you're seeing? And utilization. Utilization is key, especially that's become more of a, I would say, post-pandemic thing that we've started to see. I know people get tired of talking about that, and it's already been 3-4 years ago, but that's actually really important, because prior to COVID, we used to have customers that would say, well, how can I maximize chair time, or how much chair time am I using, especially in a multi-location or multi-specialty. Now, kind of post-COVID, I think probably everybody in here has some sort of a staffing shortage of clinicians, providers, things like that, maybe more regionalized. So that utilization data is very important to the decision makers of the organization to understand where they need to invest, or where they're maybe over-investing or under-investing.
Allison, you weren't always on Cloud9, and you had come from a server-based solution previously, and you continually kind of update and upgrade your practice. How do you know when it's time to invest in a new technology?
That's a really great question. It comes down to pain. Where is the pain point? So I'm really lucky in what I do that I'm able to focus really on the growth of the business, and I'm not as much bogged down with like daily tasks. There are some, but I really can focus on like what's going on in the clinic. Where are they experiencing some difficulties? What's going on there? And more recently with insurance, that's a huge pain point for ortho. I mean, we're trying to sell up to $7,000, $8,000 case, and we really need to know what those benefits are that day. If we have to do a pre-auth or send them away without a full understanding of their benefits, I mean, we can probably kiss that case goodbye. So I think it comes down to what are the pain points with my team. Post-COVID, it was communication. I mean, we were very lucky that we had implemented another Cloud9 integration with Rhinogram to text, and that saved us during COVID. We could send out all kinds of communications with our patients. We weren't open, but we were still interacting with them. And that whole digital process of, do you want to fill out 8, 9, 10 pages of patient information when you go to your doctor's office? Nowadays, if they give you that, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Yep. Like, come on. So, integrations with intake paperwork, that became a pain point for us. People weren't doing it. So we had to find an option that was easy for them, looked good patient-facing. So that's really what I use. Like, where are we feeling it? And then I'm like, okay, we need to find another solution, or bug Cloud9 to get it for us.
Yeah. Awesome. What about you, Emma?
So I think that anytime we're about to upgrade or do some sort of new technology, I go into the office with the doctor, with the team, once again, what makes it easy for them to have that happen for them, right? So are they gonna actually implement something that I add? So if I tell them, tell me what you want, and let's create a wish list. So I tell people all the time, Tell me what you need, tell me what you want, and tell me what you desire, and then maybe I'll get it for you. So, a great example that we're implementing right now. So I have ortho, oral surgery, pedo, and GP. I really love when I can implement something everywhere, so that way I can actually have data. Because in the end of the day, you can be doing great, but if you don't know your scoreboard, you don't really know how great you're doing, right? It's a feeling. And feelings, I checked, the bank does not accept it. It needs to equate to something. So we just implemented something super cool, all the practice. It's called Smart Chairs. So it is pretty much a sensor on your chair, and I can see how many patients are sitting on your chair, how long they've been in your chair, why are they there, and it gives me, a sense of here is the amount of patients I'm actually seeing per chair. And what matters in your dental practice, after obviously your schedule, because if there's no patient, there's nobody in your chair, obviously is your chairs, how utilization of your chairs, how you utilize, that's really up to your practice, but utilization of your chair. So we were able to implement that, and that kind of came from a doctor. So like the person who came up with the whole idea was a doctor. So I think other doctors were able to buy into it. That goes for iTero. We did a big mistake in the beginning. We thought that it was going to be so cool because everybody was talking about it. I put it in one of the practice, and it became a coat hanger. It was great. There was almost a $40,000 machine that was holding coats, guys. So what we did is we got one of our senior doctors, love it, believe it, carry it with you, go anywhere you go, the machine should go with you. As soon as that person believed in it, they started talking about it. And things started becoming more efficient in their practice. So that's how we were able to implement that everywhere. Now I have it in every office. So anytime any technology or any vendor calls me, I have the coolest thing for you. I'm like, wonderful. I'm not going to use it. So let me introduce you to a couple of folks that are going to then have to love this. And if they feel like, your sales pitch goes with your customer service side, we're on it. Tell me how much it is, and we're going to figure it out. But I think that's the choice. It has to come from the office. It has to come from the people that are going to be there 8 hours. And I tell people all the time, this is your home in the end of the day. You spend more time at work than you spend at home. So how is it that I am going to make a choice for them and not allow them to have some sort of say on it? So I prefer to have a say on it, and maybe they can make the choice for it. So I think that's how we implement everything.
Tom, with clients that you work with, I know you work with a lot of multi-location groups. When you think of like the pain points or the impetus for somebody to decide to implement a new technology like Denticon or anything that is, it's always complex with a group of that size. In fact, when we lose deals at Planet DDS, the number one reason that we lose a deal is inertia. Somebody just decided not to do anything. It's not lost to a competitor or went to somebody else. What are some of the things that overcome that inertia, or some of the pain points that just become so painful that somebody decides they have to make a change?
Typically what we see, and that's a great point, is people get scared. Right? They get scared of the big C word, change. They get scared of growth. So typically what we see is when you have organizations that undergo rapid growth in particular, and this is usually where you see some of that, is that someone thinks, well, hey, I've got 50 practices. It's impossible for me to go upset the apple cart and roll out a practice management system. Probably everybody in here is at anything of size. Anybody who has more than 3 to 5 has said, well, that's going to be a huge headache. Why would I want to undergo that? So that's probably also one of the number one things we hear as an implementation partner, right? We say, hey, I've got 50 systems, and that is very common, or I have 25 different systems. Where do I start, right? And that's always the key. So one of the very, very first things we do when we get approached in an opportunity like that, or someone asks us where we start, we say, what is your end game? And 9 out of 10 times, the end game is we want to be more efficient, we want to be on a unified platform, and we want to get all this legacy stuff out, because legacy stuff costs money, it breaks down, it's cumbersome, you could go on and on all day. But the people who are the decision makers sometimes, best intentions of saying, hey, this is the right platform for you. So it kind of goes back, and I think the sentiment's been echoed a couple times up here, is it really goes back to the buy-in. You've got to get the buy-in. So what I tell people is you have 3 different types of users typically in these types of scenarios. When you're looking at a Denticon, a Cloud9, an Aptrix, you have your clinical people, you have your back office people, and you've got your front office people, right? And then sometimes we'll say you have your executive level if it's a management type of company. You have to put a committee together at the beginning, show them how it's going to make their life easier, it is going to do that, and how standardization is going to help them. People are going to kick and scream at the beginning, but the sooner sometimes you rip off the Band-Aid, the better, and it's never too late. One of the big things too that we actually see is maybe someone's adopted the technology when they were smaller. I get calls probably 4 or 5 times a month at least where someone says, hey, we implemented Denticon when we had 5 practices. Now I've got 35 or now I've got 80. So what can I do different? And it was like, hey, we did this 7 years ago, and there was features and things that you had to do that might be cumbersome 7 years ago because that was the way the software was built, and now it works completely different. So there is options and ways that you can kind of do redeployment or changes to things to help make it more efficient as you grow. Growth is usually the #1 factor that drives change, because nobody just randomly comes in one day and says, you know what, I want to switch the practice management system, which is the lifeblood of the company. Anyone who does that, they just walk out the door, right? It's always got to be a factor that there's a pain point of something that you can't do in your daily job that drive that type of initiative.
Great. So we do want to leave a few minutes for questions, but one last question before we take any questions from the audience. Emma, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned that one of the reasons that you ultimately ended up purchasing Denticon was due to RCM capabilities. And that's something that we hear often, is that the ability of the software to facilitate the efforts of an RCM team is one of the strengths. Can you talk a little bit about what within Denticon allows your team to be more effective as it relates to RCM?
So I think that prior to even switching to Denticon, just like Tom said, who wants to switch anything? And everybody has the same reason. It's always, want to grow, want to expand, all that. For me, it was, how do I make this as efficient as possible? So every software you look at, they're very clinical based. It's very clinician, and that's great. But if you think about it, your doctor needs a chart, and he needs to make sure that there's a place to do notes. You need, is this thing? You need, propose, and you need complete. You don't really need all of this extra tools and this and that and that. And I think all software just really puts a lot of their money into the clinical side. What I liked about Denticon, they have what you need on the clinical. They make it easy, but on the revenue cycle part of it, because revenue cycle is so much more than just, claims. There is the payment plan. There is the connection into, the portal where patients can pay right through the portal. You have your claims that are very automated. You have the eligibility. You have everything there, and you set it up. And if you set it up correctly, if the foundation is where it needs to be, the system does 90% of the job for you. So for me, when I went and chose Denticon, it was after I have done 10 other demos, and one of them obviously was Denticon. And I was like, okay, doctors are going to be very unhappy with me. They're coming from a very clinical, friendly software. And believe me, they were not happy in the beginning. But when they noticed that all the write-offs, the adjustments, the frequencies, the patient statements were actually going, it wasn't a human pushing that little button, it was all very, automated, they were like, this is why you did it. I'm like, yes, that's why you did it. So this, for me, was the absolutely biggest decision we had to make, because we have not one office, but it was definitely the right decision.
We really appreciate everybody joining today. Thank you for coming to Orbit, and it's been so great to meet so many of you. Have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll look forward to seeing you all at the party dressed up. Can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.